I think a lot of service businesses are quietly drowning in manual work. And it's not because the team is bad or the business is failing. Usually it's because the business has grown successfully. But underneath all of that growth, there are spreadsheets everywhere, manual reporting, people copying information from one system to another, people chasing for updates via email and by Teams, and processes that only one person really understands. And over time, the business becomes really reliant on this manual work and some of these workarounds just to function. And because the business is successful, people start to kind of brush over and not quite realize how expensive some of these inefficiencies can be. And this all happens very naturally. A business starts off small, then someone creates a spreadsheet, someone takes on a small piece of software, someone makes a manual process. And at the beginning, of course, that's completely reasonable. But as the business starts to grow and you end up with more clients, more staff, more onboarding, more of everything, and usually the systems that underpin all of this don't quite evolve and grow to keep up with the growing business. So instead, the team usually compensate by putting more manual effort and more time behind things. And the team really end up being the glue that keeps everything together. You may have a system over here, a spreadsheet here, a manual process here, and the team end up passing information around from one to another. Now that in itself can be inefficient, but the other issue is that as clients and projects grow, usually the only way to handle that is to have more team members and more hours behind this transfer of data. So as revenue goes up, the amount of team members and administration time you need to handle that also goes up as well. And this is when day-to-day operations can start to feel like a real burden. So this is what I see in a lot of businesses and where things start to get really quite messy. We'll have some information or piece of work come into an email inbox, and maybe that then gets inputted by someone into a spreadsheet, and then maybe someone has a look at the spreadsheet and then writes up something in a team chat because something's changed. Maybe then at some point there's actually a manual follow-up to someone in the team or a customer. Maybe then there's a client update, and possibly at the end of this, a monthly report that goes out. And all of this works, but only because there's people in between every step, making sure that this information flows to the right people at the right time when it should do. Symptoms of this include an awful lot of manual work, and then work that is just duplicated over and over and over again that looks very, very similar. And when we have this much repeated manual work, there's only so much that can be done, especially if it's only maybe one or two people that can actually complete certain aspects of it. That's when we start to get a real bottleneck. And look, nobody designed it to be this way, but that's just what's happened over time. Let me give you a real world example of where I worked with a business that relied heavily on hiring temporary staff. And over time, it was one master spreadsheet that had become the real center of the business. Pretty much, it really relied on temporary staff. And yeah, the master spreadsheet was the center of it all. And the way it would work is that a candidate would fill out a form. That then makes an email come into our or their system. So someone picks that up, and as I said before, enters into a spreadsheet. Someone then has to look at that and then remember to do ID checks for the person. And if they don't get back immediately with their ID, they'd have to make a note on the spreadsheet to say that they haven't got back to them with the ID, then do a manual follow-up with them. And then when that was all done, there'd be more paperwork to do to actually onboard them and take them on as a team member. What was worse with this is that it was only actually one person that understood how to do this process from end to end. People could come in and do little pieces like take some ID, for example, or update the spreadsheet, but to do everything end to end, it was only really one employee that truly got it. So when they wanted to grow and take on more staff, that was a true business bottleneck. The person was working 50-hour weeks and they were just on the cusp of taking on another full-timer with a view of, look, it's going to take 3 months to train them up on all of this, but at the end of it, they'll have maybe not quite double capacity, but they'll have kind of 70% more, getting up to be double, maybe over 6 to 9 months. And then the question arises, what happens if they want to 5x the number of staff they're taking on. I mean, that looks like it's going to be 5 admin people. What's more, it's this spreadsheet that was the real kind of centerpiece for all the data and operations. And the trouble with spreadsheets are, the more people that you've got that come in and start editing, adding to it, coming up with their own ideas, manipulating data, the more confusing it gets. The more people query, well, hang on, what's happened here? Who entered that in that cell? Why is this row being deleted? So it doesn't even scale one-to-one. The more people you add, you get less than a full person's worth of admin time because of the extra complication, because of the lack of audit trail. In this case then, it made real sense for them to put a little bit of investment behind a bespoke system. So nothing on the market really did what they wanted to. They'd have to do a load of workarounds to kind of fudge an existing system into some quite particular processes and ways of doing things. So what we made was a candidate portal where for the people applying, they could send in their application with basic details. On our admin side, they could be alerted to a new application and then accept or decline. If accepted, we could notify the applicant that they've been accepted and we need ID. The applicant could load up ID straight into the system that stores that all securely. We could then notify the admin again that the ID is there and that can be checked. And then they can automatically trigger the onboarding forms to be sent, which again goes back to the candidate who can complete them. And then we have a finished application. And still at the end of that, there was some manual interaction, especially towards the end, once they've been kind of formally onboarded. There's a more impersonal onboarding that took place. But although there's lots of arrows going around, this is quite a simple system. Ultimately, it's an application form and a place to upload documents with some reminders and alerts put in at the right times. Also, there was no need to store statuses in anyone's head. If someone hadn't sent in their ID, for example, we could flag this easily in the system and say, look, it's been 7 days since you asked for ID and this person hasn't sent it. We can automatically send a follow-up based off that information. Now, the system wasn't a silver bullet. There was still some admin that needed to be done and human involvement, absolutely. But this turned into one person spending 20 hours a week doing more of the fun in-person stuff rather than just relentlessly chasing for IDs and documentation and trying to keep tabs on everything. And they didn't need to hire that extra person in the end. And their job could actually, because it was only 20 hours a week that was needed for this, that freed up an extra 20 hours for them to work on some bigger projects for the business. So not a bad time saving for them. And the system can handle, kind of 10x the number of applicants without much problem. Maybe this person's time is going to get eaten away and become a full-time role again if that happens, but it's not to the same magnitude as the way it was before. Now, the point of that example was to show that you don't necessarily need massive organizational change. They didn't need an AI project. They didn't need more staff, more meetings, refined processes, refined standard operating procedures. They didn't need any of that. Their bottleneck was clear, and it was one quite boring operational system that unlocked a lot of opportunity for growth and scale. And I think with the amount of AI tools and kind of shiny stuff out there, sometimes quite easy to get distracted when, if you rein it in a little bit, something quite simple that can make the biggest difference. If you want to identify opportunities for systems and automations in your business, try asking these questions. What gets repeated every week? What needs copying and pasting? What process or task only depends on one person? What creates admin bottlenecks? What work causes delays or needs chasing? Where are you relying heavily on spreadsheets? Those are some good places to take a first look. So most businesses don't need more complexity. They need a small, targeted software system or automation that hits at the right place. This is something I spend a lot of time helping businesses with. If you've got something that you're trying to fix or some indecision about which way to go with a problem in your business, and you think that it's a system, piece of software or automation that could solve it, do get in contact. I offer technical clarity sessions that can help give you some direction on where you need to take things.